Hey everyone, welcome to Badaboom. I'm Troy. The time has finally come to talk about Watchmen. Now, if you haven't been keeping up, there have been 2 animated Watchmen movies that have come out this year. And they're honestly a reflection of the comics in probably the best way possible. And we'll dive into that in a minute. Because what I really want to talk about is what's the best way to experience Watchmen? We've got a live action movie, there's a television series, we've got the DC Compact, you can read it digitally, you can buy like the regular full volume, and now we have these animated movies. So if you've never watched Watchmen or haven't really got into it, what's the best place to start and which one's the best kind of overall? That's who I was a couple months ago when the DC Watchmen Compact came out, because I hadn't really done a lot with Watchmen. I knew about some of the characters, but I didn't know the story. I knew there was a live action movie, but I kind of didn't really know anything else. So I decided, let's dive in, let's experience everything that we can about Watchmen this year and kind of compare everything and see how everything lands. So what is the best way to watch Watchmen or to experience Watchmen? So I think first off, if you're going to watch Watchmen or experience Watchmen, you should read the comics. And when it comes to comics, you have a couple of options. You've got the DC Compacts, you've got a larger trade, and then you've got digital. And if I were to rate those, I would probably say the trade is the best way to go. Digital is a close second. And then there's nothing wrong with this because it's only like $10, $20. And honestly, like for the price, this is as good of a recommendation for someone that maybe doesn't care too much about comics, but just wants to know the story. Go with this. Now, why did I put the volume first? Well, when you get into it, there are a couple of different subplots, a couple of different stories where we flash back between what's happening in a kid's comic book and what's happening with all the other characters. And sometimes it's kind of tough to get into those scenes or understand the parallels between these stories because in the compact, the font's a little bit small. You can read it and you can understand it, but it may just kind of be like, okay, come on, hurry up, let's get to the next part of the story. But when you have a larger format where it's not straining your eyes to see the way some of this text is written, it's easier to stay in the story and draw those parallels without having to reread or squint your eyes. So, gotta say, comics, hands down, gotta do that first, but try and do a larger print, the digital, and then if you just really, don't want to spend that money, I don't blame you. Read the compact. It's great for the price, and you're going to get the story regardless. Now, what comes next when it comes to live action and the animated movies? I'm going to say the animated movies because, again, they are a direct parallel pretty much of the comic book, like frame for frame of what happens in the comic book happens in the movies. There's a couple of times where some things kind of deviate just a little bit, but overall, everything is pretty much there and it looks almost exactly the same. So it's hard not to recommend that if you're not into comics and you're just like, oh, I just want to experience Watchmen and understand what it's about because it's a cultural thing. Watch the 2 animated movies. And I say 2 because they did it right. When you do it as 2 chapters, there's so much stuff in Watchmen. I mean, look at this compact. This is a thick compact. And to do this all in one movie would be tough. So I'm really glad they split it into 2 separate chapters for the animated movies. And they kept it really, really true to the comics. Nothing's like taken out or really added. It's a really good representation of the book. Now, when it comes to live action, I watched this and there's just so much stuff they take out. And you kind of have to, and I expect to do that in movies, but also just the style in which it's shot. I mean, Zack Snyder we know Zack Snyder's style. And after watching this, I was just like, man, I am really sick of just his style and how it's done. Like visually, it looks good, but like sometimes it's like too good. And it's like, it needs to be darker, it needs to be grittier, it needs to like feel more real. Like I get taken out of this movie so many times because I'm like, this looks too fake, too polished. It just doesn't feel good, and I get taken out of it and I can't enjoy the rest of the movie really. And I almost turned it off, but I really kept watching it because Jeffrey Morgan is just such a good comedian. Like, great casting. He's so good. And I really just kept watching it because of him, because I was like, he killed it in this. But there were many times I was like, okay, I want to turn this off. They left too many parts out that were important, or little subtle things that I thought emphasized the larger story as a whole. So I wouldn't recommend it. And it's tough because, when we get a live action movie, we want it to be great. And that's probably what most people saw in theaters. And then I don't blame people for being like, I don't really get it. I don't know what was happening or why that was important. I remember when this movie came out, and I didn't see it back then, but one of my friends saw it, and they were a little bit older than me, and I asked them, oh, hey, I know it's based on a comic book. Did you like it? And they just said, I don't understand what the point of that movie was. All I remember is this big blue naked guy. And yeah, like, there's just not enough. There's too much stuff actually to put into this movie to make it feel like, yeah, this was a good concept. This is a well-told story. There's too many things that were left out. And I know originally Zach wanted to do it as a series. And I think now, if we had said, hey, we can now do it as a series, 30-minute episodes, 10 episodes, it would probably come out great. But this movie came out like in the 2000s. So different times. Too little too late, But there is a Watchmen series, and you might be thinking, there is a Watchmen series, but that doesn't follow the Watchmen. And that's actually 100% true. It doesn't follow the Watchmen, so this is kind of more as a honorable mention. Now, the Watchmen series, I watched it, and I thought it was great. I was really skeptical at first, like, what are they doing updating this and providing like the next chapter so many years later? And it was just like, I was really against it watching it. Like, I like all the original Watchmen stuff, even though I just seen it like a couple of weeks ago. And I just thought, they're not going to do that good. It's not going to be that good. Holy cow. This was an amazing series. Like, it's important to know what happens in the original Watchmen because some of those characters are still around. But overall, it's such a good series. And I could probably make an entire another video about that series alone. The way they connect the dots, the way they have Vedic like on a moon around Jupiter, and the way Dr. Manhattan is like woven into the story, but we still get to see all these new characters and understand who they are. And also like everything that kind of happens like in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Like, I'm from Oklahoma, and so some of these things that they were talking about, I was like, yeah, we were taught that stuff in school. And so the way they like wove it into history was crazy, and also makes it feel a bit more realistic, especially in Watchmen. They talk about some of the things that are happening with like the president at the time, and that makes it feel a bit more realistic too. And it's like happening during the Cold War, and so we get a larger sense of how important some things are in these stories, because we don't really have to think about a fictional thing too often. Like, there's so many things in it that are tied to things that actually happen, so we can get bought into the fantasy a little bit easier. If you've watched all the Watchmen stuff but you haven't seen the show because you're scared that it takes things in a different direction or isn't that good, definitely watch the Watchmen television series. It is incredible. But what do you guys think? The animated movies just finished their 2 chapters. It just came out this past week. Have you guys taken a look at it? Have you watched it? What do you guys think is the best way to consume the Watchmen stories? And if you had to recommend the book or the show or whatever, anything to someone to get them introduced to it, what would it be? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace.